History has a habit of making fools out of the confident and heroes out of the insane. We often dismiss the whistleblowers and the fringe theorists as delusional, only to find out decades later that the truth was simply too uncomfortable for the mainstream to handle. Today, we are looking at 10 times in history when the people everyone laughed at turned out to be the only ones telling the truth. Number 1. The Drifting Continents of Alfred Wegener. In 1912, a German meteorologist named Alfred Wegener looked at a map and saw something so obvious a child could notice it. South America and Africa fit together like jagged puzzle pieces. He proposed continental drift, suggesting that all the Earth's land masses were once a single supercontinent called Pangaea. The scientific community didn't just disagree, they were vicious. Geologists ridiculed him for being a weatherman stepping into their territory. They demanded to know how a continent, a massive slab of rock, could possibly plow through the ocean floor. Without a known mechanism like plate tectonics, Wegener was labeled a crank. He died in a blizzard in Greenland in 1930, still a laughingstock. It took until the 1960s, with the discovery of seafloor spreading, for the world to realize he was a genius. Today, his frozen body in Greenland is drifting approximately 2 centimeters per year on the very tectonic plates he died trying to prove existed. Number 2. The FBI versus Ernest Hemingway. In the final years of his Nobel Prize-winning author Ernest Hemingway, he became convinced he was being hunted. He told friends that agents were tapping his phones, intercepting his mail, and following him to his favorite bars. His family and doctors assumed he was suffering from late-stage alcoholism or mental decay. They committed him to a clinic and administered 13 rounds of electroshock therapy, which destroyed his memory and his ability to write. Broken and unable to practice his craft, Hemingway took his own life in 1961. Decades later, a Freedom of Information Act request revealed a 127-page FBI file. J. Edgar Hoover had personally ordered the surveillance starting in the 1940s because of Hemingway's ties to Cuba. Agents were in the bars. They were reading his mail. The paranoia that led to his medical treatment and eventual death was actually a perfectly accurate observation of his reality. Number 3. The Light Bulb Conspiracy. Planned Obsolescence. If you've ever felt like your smartphone starts glitching the moment the new model is released, you aren't crazy. You're a victim of a century-old business strategy. For decades, planned obsolescence was considered a cynical conspiracy theory, but in 1924, it became a documented secret policy. The world's top light bulb manufacturers, including GE, Osram, and Philips, formed the Phoebus cartel. At the time, bulbs lasted about 2,500 hours. The cartel realized that long-lasting bulbs were bad for business. They secretively re-engineered filaments to ensure bulbs burned out after exactly 1,000 hours and issued heavy fines to any member company that made a bulb too durable. They didn't just innovate, they anti-innovated. Every time your modern tech fails just after the warranty expires, you can trace that frustration back to a smoke-filled room in Geneva in 1924. Number 4. The government's poisoned alcohol. In Prohibition in the 1920s, the U.S. government was losing the war against bootleggers who stole industrial alcohol to make gin. To stop them, the federal government ordered a deadly change. Manufacturers were required to add denaturants, poisonous chemicals like methanol, kerosene, and chloroform to industrial alcohol. They knew people would still try to drink it. They did it anyway. By the time Prohibition ended, an estimated 10,000 Americans had died from drinking government-poisoned booze.
When the chief medical examiner of New York City called it legalized murder, the government's response was a chilling shrug, claiming that if citizens broke the law by drinking, their deaths were their own fault. It wasn't a rumor, it was a lethal federal policy aimed at its own population.
Number 5. The $11 Life, the Ford Pinto Scandal. In the 1970s, whispers began that the Ford Pinto was a rolling coffin. Critics claimed the fuel tank was positioned so poorly that a low-speed rear-end collision would cause the car to explode. Ford dismissed the fear-mongering. However, an internal memo later revealed a horrifying truth. Ford knew exactly what was wrong. The fix would have cost only $11 per car, but Ford's accountants ran a cost-benefit analysis. They estimated the cost of paying out settlements for 180 burn deaths and 180 injuries would be about $49.5 million. The cost of recalling and fixing the cars was $121 million. They decided it was literally cheaper to let people burn. This wasn't just corporate negligence, it was a calculated decision that human life had a specific lower price tag than a piece of plastic. Number 6. The Ulcer Whistleblower, Barry Marshall. For a century, the medical establishment knew that stomach ulcers were caused by stress and spicy food. If you suggested it was an infection, you were mocked. In 1984, Dr. Barry Marshall was tired of being called a crank. To prove that a bacterium called H. pylori was the real culprit, he did the unthinkable. He grew a batch of the bacteria in a lab, stirred it into a broth, and drank it in front of his colleagues. He developed a massive, painful ulcer within days. He then biopsied his own stomach to prove the infection was there and cured himself with simple antibiotics. His insane stunt revolutionized medicine, proving that ulcers were a curable infection, not a lifestyle result. In 2005, the man who was once laughed out of medical journals was awarded the Nobel Prize. Number 7. Project MK Ultra, CIA Mind Control. For 20 years, if you told someone the CIA was kidnapping people and dousing them with high-grade LSD to break their minds, you'd be fitted for a tinfoil hat. Then, in 1977, a cache of 20,000 misfiled documents survived in order to be destroyed. They revealed Project MK Ultra. The CIA had indeed been conducting illegal experiments on unwitting U.S. and Canadian citizens at over 80 institutions. They used sensory deprivation, hypnosis, and massive doses of psychedelics on prisoners, mental patients, and even random people at bars to see if they could develop mind control or truth serums. The reality was far more terrifying than any conspiracy theory had dared to imagine. Number 8. The Invisible City of Oak Ridge. During World War II, a rumor spread in Tennessee about a secret city that didn't appear on any map. It sounded like a tall tale until the war ended. The U.S. government had built the city of Oak Ridge from scratch in 1942. It housed 75,000 people, consumed more electricity than New York City, and was surrounded by high-security fences and guard towers. Most of the 75,000 residents had no idea what they were actually making. They were told to turn dials and push buttons without asking questions. It wasn't until the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima that the people living in Oak Ridge realized they had spent 3 years enriching the uranium that changed the world. An entire metropolitan population was kept in the dark while living inside the world's largest secret. Number 9. Operation Northwoods. In the early 1960s, a crazy theory suggested that the U.S. military was willing to attack its own people to start a war. In 1997, declassified documents proved that the Joint Chiefs of Staff had actually proposed exactly that. Operation Northwoods was a formal plan to stage terrorist attacks on American soil.
The proposal included blowing up a U.S. ship, hijacking planes, and orchestrating funerals for mock victims in American cities, all to be blamed on Cuba to justify an invasion. Every high-ranking military leader signed off on it. The only reason it didn't happen is that President John F. Kennedy personally rejected the plan. The conspiracy wasn't a fringe fantasy, it was a signed memorandum sitting on the Secretary of Defense's desk.
Number 10. The sugar industry's 50-year lie. In the 1960s, we were told that fat was the enemy. We were pushed toward low-fat diets, which were packed with sugar to make up for the taste. Anyone who suggested sugar was the real cause of heart disease was silenced. In 2016, researchers uncovered internal documents from the Sugar Research Foundation. They had paid 3 Harvard scientists, the equivalent of $50,000 today, to publish a study in the New England Journal of Medicine that intentionally downplayed the link between sugar and heart disease while scapegoating dietary fat. This secret bribe shaped global nutrition policy for 5 decades, fueling a global obesity and diabetes epidemic. The conspiracy to make the world fat was actually just a well-funded marketing campaign by Big Sugar. The lesson of these 10 stories is simple. Truth does not require a majority vote. Whether it's a scientist drinking bacteria or a writer being chased by the FBI, the people we call crazy today might just be the ones who see the world for what it actually is. So I want to hear from you. What is something you believe right now that the rest of the world thinks is total nonsense? Because, as history shows us, the truth usually comes out eventually. Thanks for watching.